Then I have this layout options, and let me just edit the index file. Activate that, and it is not a beautiful or useful application, and again it does the same thing in like 3 different ways, and find the one that you think is the best and use it. But we have these buttons here and there, and when I click on the buttons, it just adds those numbers into the bottom. And one of the things here is the layout. So, well, I open the console, and that also allows me to adjust how much space there is for the application. And you can see that some of the elements on the left are adjusting their size more or less. It's good to do this kind of a exercise every now and then if you want to, well, maybe not early in this course so critical, but when you at least when you are doing some real applications, the responsiveness, as it's called in the web world, often how well the interface scales in the different window sizes and so on. That's important part, so that you are only testing your application in your own computer in full size window, and then somebody comes and tries your app with the mobile phone or some old computer or some massively large display with lots of pixels, then suddenly things may look horrible for them. But yeah, as said, there are 3 different ways it's working. So it's basically putting these 9 different buttons, similar buttons, into layout with 3 different solutions, exactly the same content, 1, 2, and 3 different solutions. I'm using the make styles here very briefly here. It's not the key part of this. I have only one variable. It's the value, this text here where the numbers are assembled into. I have one event handler for adding that. And here is the first thing. It's not about the layout, but it's more generic React thing, just showing you that this is possible. I'm creating the buttons here in a loop. So first I create a variable, buttons, it's an array. And then in the for loop, I first define the handler. So it receives the event, and then it goes add the value and the value I, which is the value of the variable here in the loop. That's how JavaScript works. It's bound at this point to be the fixed value. Then I add into this buttons array a button, and for the on click I define the handler and put inside the button this I, this value from the loop. And then one key important thing when you are, if you are creating components in a loop or with map function or something like that, React really wants you to specify this key, which should be unique. In this case, I just give the value I in there. So that in the end of this, I have an array of buttons in a variable, and then here is the return part. If we look at the first part, I'm just defining a box, setting some parameters there, and inside the box, I put the first 4 buttons, and inside another box, the next 4 buttons, and inside another box, the remaining buttons. So this causes us to have the 1, 2, 3, 4 buttons, second set of buttons, and third set of buttons. So these are all come from the same array. I just take with the slice the first 4 elements. So this is an array of 4 buttons. This is an array of 4 buttons, and this is the array. So in practice, there's 2 left. And the handlers have been created and added to those, so those will work as well. So in many cases, you can use some sort of loops to create elements, perhaps not buttons so often, but especially when you have some tables and long lists or things like that, where you displaying some information from some data structure, then you might want to do this approach so that you build them in the separate variable first, or we will see also this map function, which is very efficient sometimes when you have like data in the arrays and you need to display that. But then about layout, well, for the loops, I just define this border in these different places so that you can see that there is the first box there, and then there is another thing with border here, and finally one more thing with border. This is just made to help you a little bit see where different elements go in here. And this flex display solution is quite powerful part of the CSS. For example, this css-tricks.com has this complete guide to Flexbox, which might help you if you are not familiar with it. It's very visual one, so that's why I chose to show this. But of course, the internet is full of these guides on how to use the Flex. Flex solutions. So the box element has support for a lot of this. So you can specify that box should be displayed as flex element. This P here is actually spacing, and this REM is unique for sizes, which is scales well when the user has different font sizes, settings, and so on. You can use it in the typography, you can use it here. And I'm specifying the height here as well. So the flex, well, in this case, the flex doesn't do all that much. It just puts them elements side by side. And yeah, I'm just using boxes here. So each box becomes, well, basically on an HTML level, they just become divs if you don't specify anything else. And then these boxes become these flex style elements. The second set of these buttons, I'm using a grid. So first there is a box, again with a border. And then I'm using this grid. And when you are using grid, material UI grid, you must specify whether this grid is a container, meaning it has other grid elements inside it, or if it's a grid item. And here it contains grid container with grid items, which contain again grid container. And then it contains another set of grid elements, which then contain the buttons. And you can here set different things, like there are these things that, okay, I'm telling I would like to have 4 elements in the grid. Well, I'm not myself yet have thorough understanding of this grid either. So, but this small and medium and large tell how to do the layout in different sizes of displays. So these are part of this responsiveness, so that the material UI has this system where it defines the different sizes like large display, small display, medium display. So you can provide some of the parameters for these different display sizes. But then here is an example of this map, which I think we will see more examples later. Now the buttons was the array where I have the buttons. And I call map on the array, and then I must provide a function. Function is here basically, and the map provides up to 3 parameters. I'm using 2 of them here. The first is the item, so B is the one of the buttons. So each of the buttons becomes the B at their time. And the second value is the index, so this is the number which button this is 0, 1, 2, 3, so on up to 9 because I have 9 buttons or 10 buttons. So index is from 0 to 9. And then this function returns this grid element, and here key, I'm just putting this gr underscore start, and then I put the index in there so that I get this unique key for each of the elements in this loop. Especially in the developer console, if I just remove this key value, I'm not providing a key, you can see something red in here. So it says each child in a list should have unique key property. Check the render method of app for more information. So you get that sort of warnings. Things still work, but you might actually end up with some funny results, and especially if the keys are not unique, you might end up with duplicate components when you start using the interface, and some funny things happening. So this key, whenever you're using these loops, whether with map or loops, to create lists of components, having a unique key for each of them is important. And here I'm including the actual button inside the grid. It's map grid. And then as the last option, so there is the last one with same buttons there. Here I'm basically going directly into the JavaScript, not JavaScript, but HTML. So these are not then material UI components, but HTML tags using div tag and providing inline style here. Another div tag, inline style here, setting the display to flex, adding flex wrap, justify content from the flex start, align content, flex start. So using the flex system here by putting directly HTML components and inline styles, and then doing the same as in the first case, sliding the buttons array, just putting the parts of the buttons array in there. So this is how your code might look like if you are just writing plain React, not using the material UI. And you can of course mix this approach and the material UI and possibly some other component library. But usually life is easier if you just use one approach and one solution rather than mixing these different things. But I'm showing them to let you know that there are options and hopefully not confusing you too much with all going through all this, that you can do this or this or this. Not giving you strict commands to do this. Okay, I think that is all. So you can look at this on your own schedule once I have it in the Moodle soon, hopefully later today. And I think that's everything I want to say about this example. So, unless there are then questions, I have a handful of summary slides to remind you what are the things we're talking today. So first we looked at yeah, I can provide an example. I think I need to do I have some well, I guess I can just show that my solution to the first example. That's the easiest way. Perhaps let me just quickly. So let's copy and paste this into the another editor where it's a little bit bigger. So I have the checkbox here, which inside the form control label, but that's not, well, way to get the label in there, but of course it works without this as well. Critical thing is, of course, the event handler, the on chains, and then to have the checked value coming from a variable. So middle name enabled is the variable. So these are the two critical things. Adjust check here is this function. There are actually two different ways to get the value in this event handler, and I'm using this format where I'm using both you receive two values to the event handler. First is the event, and another one is this value, whether the checkbox is checked or not. So now I just call this enable middle name, which is the in the state variables. I have this boolean middle name enabled and enable middle name, which is setting. Another way is just to use the event, and I believe that's event.target.value, which also contains the information whether it is checked or not. I think at least with one of you we use that approach. And yeah, the middle enabled is the boolean value, so that goes back to the checkbox through this checked attribute. Information always travels in React two ways, from the component and back. So there is the event handler, in this case called adjust check, and then there is some value depending on the component in checkbox is checked, and in most components the event handler is on change, and this adjust check, I'm just putting a value into this variable, and then the value of this variable travels back to the checkbox through here.
Okay, so for this second small exercise, several checkboxes.
Yeah.
And would that go?
Yeah, well, there are the three different ways to approach the exercise with several different checkboxes. Kind of the brute force way is to just put 8 different checkboxes and have 8 event handlers and 8 variables for each of them. But then if you want to optimize it, you can have some sort of an array instead of 8 different state variables where all of the 8 values go in there. And then you can use this arrow notation, like one of the examples I showed earlier. In this case, like the font size selections here, using the arrow notation here to call a function with specific value. So this could, for example, be so that you just do one function where you update the array, but provide like the index of, okay, update the first checkbox, update the second, third, so that you don't need to have like 8 different handlers if you don't want to do that.
But you still need to have 8 checkboxes.
You need to have, of course, 8 checkboxes because there's an interface you need to do that, but of course you can create those checkboxes in a for loop. So similar to the this option or this example, here I have this loop, for loop, where I'm creating the 10 different buttons. So you could have a for loop like this and create 8 different checkboxes for that exercise if you want to. So if you really start squeezing it, the solution doesn't have to be all that many lines. But of course, there is always this balance of squeezing things into very compact solution and making things understandable. So I think at some point the code becomes quite obfuscated and hard to read, and maybe even you yourself can't figure it out after a couple of months what on earth is happening here and how on earth I end up with all these components. So usually something in between so that it doesn't explode to be too long to read, but still as clearly visible as possible for the other people and for yourself, what is the structure and how the application works. But yeah, this goes kind of into the programming profession overall. So, and different areas, different programming styles are good and bad programming styles. So that, but in most cases, the code that is easy to read and easy to understand is the best code because it's easiest to maintain and make sure that it doesn't have bugs. But of course, it can be a pleasure to write this very elegant code which does lots of things with a couple of lines of program code. I do personally enjoy that, to be able to squeeze things into a couple of codes, but it has downsides.